Written in Bone, Chapter 7, Part 3. During the 17th century, when the English buried a husband and wife beside each other, they traditionally placed the husband's grave on the north side of the wife's grave. The large lead coffin was on the north side of the woman's coffin, so the team knew that if the large coffin contained the remains of a man, he may well have been the woman's husband. No one expected what they actually found inside the coffin, though. "We were shocked," Miller recalled. "From the waist up, most of the bone had been transformed into a white crystalline material." Miller and his team feel certain that the surprising state of the skeleton is a result of embalming. During this burial practice, the organs are removed from inside the body and the skull. When remains were embalmed during the 17th century, the empty body and skull were cleaned and filled with a mixture of salt, a white powder called alum, lime, a substance found in certain types of rocks, and herbs. This mixture preserved the body by slowing the rate of decomposition. How did the team link the crystal remains to this practice? Geologists identified the crystals found in the coffin as a mineral called brushite.
Brushite.
Brushite forms when elements in salt and alum combine with calcium, one of the elements in bone. The brushite was located in exactly the areas where embalming materials would have been placed. Bones in other areas were unchanged. If the team's analysis is correct, the brushite remains are the earliest evidence of embalming in colonial America. Fortunately, the rest of the skeleton had not transformed into brushite. From the waist down, the skeleton was in excellent condition, Henry Miller noted. Even the toenails were there. These bones, along with teeth found in the coffin, provided Owsley and Brühlheide with enough evidence to conclude that the remains belonged to a male in his 50s who was probably right-handed, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, and, as suggested by the coffin's width, somewhat overweight. His bones showed no evidence that he had worked long hours doing heavy chores. Clearly, like the captain at Jamestown, the lead coffin man had been a gentleman of the upper class. Owsley found no signs of debilitating illness, ongoing health problems, or severe injury. It appeared the man probably died after a short or sudden illness, such as a fever or a heart attack. So compared to the lead coffin lady, not much remained of the lead coffin man's skeleton. So you can see this is all that was left of him. And we've got this picture here. The lead coffin man's teeth had semicircular grooves like the ones in these teeth, and they told Owsley the man had smoked a pipe. He did smoke, however. Owsley puzzled out the facts this way. The man in the grave had 17 teeth. They showed signs of moderate wear and 2 small cavities. The teeth are what told Owsley that the man was a smoker. When pipe smokers repeatedly clamp their teeth on a pipe stem to hold the pipe in place, the edges of their teeth become worn. The worn areas are called facets. The wear pattern that pipe facets create exactly reflects the curve of a pipe's stem. The lead coffin man's pipe facets proved he was a pipe smoker. Meanwhile, Tim Riordan had found traces of silk ribbon in the area where the man's neck would have been and around each of his wrists. The man must have worn a burial garment other than a shroud. From historical research, Riordan had learned that toward the end of the 17th century, shrouds were often replaced, especially among wealthier people, with a long shirt-like garment and a cap with a chin strap. The women who prepared the lead coffin man's body must have thought that he deserved the very best burial garb, yet another indication that he was a person of high status. Although the third coffin and its contents had provided much information, the team's hope of learning about 17th century air were dashed when Miller received the results of the laboratory tests on the air sample taken before the coffin was opened. The analysis revealed that the sample was indeed very old, but it also contained chemical components not found in pure air. Miller thinks that these chemicals came from the materials used to embalm the man's body. Even worse, the sample also contained small traces of a modern gas that showed the coffin air had been contaminated before the team sampled it. For these reasons, the team was unable to draw any conclusions from the sample about 17th century air. While the team knew much more about the lead coffin people than when they began their examinations, they hoped they could add one more puzzle piece. Would it be possible to find out the identities of the coffin occupants? Naming the unnamed. That task became a priority for Lloyd Green Carr, the historian for Project Lead Coffins in St. Mary's City. Lois. As she compiled a list of possible names from historical documents, she kept in mind several facts and theories. Archaeological data told her that the 3 lead coffins were buried between 1667 and 1704, the dates when the chapel had been used. Since the burials were inside the chapel, the people must have been wealthy Roman Catholics who had been important community members. From Owsley and Brulheide's work, Carr knew that the sex of each adult and their approximate ages at the time of death. Because the 3 coffins were buried together, the archaeologists were inclined to believe that the individuals were related. However, the woman's age, at least 60, ruled her out as the baby's mother. A piece of data from the laboratory analysis proved especially useful. The carbon-13 value for the lead coffin man was negative 17.4. The lead coffin ladies was negative 17.1. These 2 people had lived in Maryland, eating corn as part of their diets, long enough for the carbon-13 content of their bones to change accordingly. Carr therefore eliminated from her list of candidates the names of people who had died shortly after their arrival from England. Carr focused her search first on men who fit the criteria. This choice was more likely to produce successful results because English men of the 17th century, far more often than women, were mentioned in legal documents such as land deeds, business transactions, wills, and government papers. Under the law, married women did not have equal status with men, especially in the area of property ownership. Thus, they were seldom mentioned in historical documents, making research about women far more difficult. Carr therefore assembled a list of prominent men of 17th century Maryland, including details such as age, the names of wives when they had arrived in North America, their occupations and community standing, and where and at what time of year they had died. The small amount of pollen found in the man's coffin indicated he was buried in the winter, a time when little pollen is floating in the air. Carr's final list included 10 men, but only one, Philip Calvert, perfectly fit all the historical evidence as well as the scientific evidence collected by Project Lead Coffins scientists. So we have got a map here, and this map dates from 1671 when Cecil Calvert and his half-brother Philip were still alive and active. It shows the extent of Maryland and includes the Calvert coat of arms, or the family symbol. The words on the symbol translate to, deeds are masculine, words are feminine. Carr's thorough search of the historical record revealed that Philip Calvert was the younger half-brother of Cecil Calvert, the founder of the Maryland colony. Philip and his wife, Anne Wolsey Calvert, arrived in St. Mary's City in 1657. Over the years, he served as the governor, the mayor of St. Mary's City, the chief judge, and the chancellor of the colony, all very powerful positions. Philip was a very wealthy man. The historical record indicates that. His home, a red brick mansion he named St. Peter's, was the largest colonial mansion in English America in 1678. That makes it a major building, Henry Miller stated. From a 1682 inventory of Philip's property, Lois Carr discovered that Philip had a personal library of more than 100 books, one of the largest libraries in colonial Maryland. This wealth alone would have given him a prominent place in St. Mary's City society. But Philip Calvert was clearly respected for his leadership in the community as well. He was therefore a fitting candidate for a lead coffin burial. While the exact date of Philip's death eluded Carr, she did find a document that narrowed the possibilities to sometime between December 22, 1682 and late January 1683. He was 56 years old at the time of his death. In a will dated 1678, Anne Calvert was left a silver watch. Evidently, Carr concluded, Anne must have been alive then. But Philip and his wife, Jane, not Anne, signed a deed or ownership paper in March 1681. It seemed equally evident to Carr that Anne had died sometime before that date and that Philip had then remarried. His second wife, Jane Sewell, was much younger than he was, probably between 15 and 17 years old when they were married, the average age of marriage for female colonists born in Maryland. Since Anne would have been too old and too sickly to have been the mother of the baby in the smallest lead coffin, Carr and Henry Miller think that Jane was the child's mother. Although no documents have been found to confirm a child from the second marriage, only the child of a very important person, Philip Calvert, for example, would have qualified for a lead coffin burial. Here we have Philip Calvert's signature on a court document from 1657. The identification of the remains as those of Anne and Philip Calvert presented the team with another curious puzzle. Anne Wolsey Calvert died 2 years before Philip, yet the grave shaft stratigraphy showed that they were buried at the same time, inside the same grave shaft, presumably after Philip died. Where had Anne's coffin been for the intervening 2 years? One scenario is that the entire grave had been dug when Anne died, wide enough for both husband and wife. In this scenario, Anne would have been placed in one side of the shaft, which was left open so that Philip's coffin could be buried beside her when he died. Miller doesn't think this is likely, though, because pollen would have sifted into the unoccupied side of the crypt. There was no pollen under Philip's coffin. There is also no evidence that Anne's coffin had been dug up and then reburied beside Philip. Miller is sure that if this had occurred, the lead coffin would have been nicked by whatever tools were used to dig it up. The coffin had no such nicks, so Anne's coffin must have been stored somewhere. Was it awaiting shipment to England for burial there, but then given a final resting place in the colony when Philip died? So far, the team hasn't discovered the answer to this riddle. Still, the shared grave of the lead coffin family has revealed a wealth of information about the lives and deaths of St. Mary's City most well-to-do residents.